Let's cross to London and speak to Will Geddes, who is a counterterrorism expert and a specialist on hostage negotiations. I'd just like to ask for your opinion on the sort of the lay of the land in France and across Europe, because we haven't had an attack on that scale for a number of years now, at least not here in France. But that doesn't mean the threat disappeared, does it?
No, you're absolutely right. The last terrorist-related attack that you had in France was back in May last year of a female member of the gendarmes who was stabbed. And the one thing we've got to consider is that although nothing has actually happened, that doesn't mean that it won't happen. And we are in a very, very kind of delicate period right now where we've come out of all these lockdowns. We have a conflict going on in Ukraine. There are a number of other factors, obviously, that are influencing also a strong political leaning towards far right, that the threat isn't necessarily international jihadism, but very much from the far right extremism as well. So there is a number of different groups that need to be monitored right now.
We've been talking, a lot about the main defendant there, Salah Abdeslam, the sole surviving member of the attack team. But there are 19 others on trial, of whom 6 are being tried in absentia, and of them, we assume some are dead. I mean, do you think that's a reasonable assumption? What makes us sure or even suspect they might no longer be alive?
Well, I think certainly in terms of their presence not being obviously evident, I think that's a key thing. But certainly one of the things which I hope will be an outcome from certainly the judge's ruling in the sentencing will be the defendants that have been charged with providing facilitation. Because one of the biggest challenges in combating terrorism is not necessarily just getting to the individual that perpetrates it, whether it be the person who actually puts the bomb in the location, undertakes the attack in some shape or form, but it is those that are providing the support, the housing, the food, the weaponry, the explosives, if need be. And I think it's very important that hopefully, if obviously the sentencing comes through with guilty, that those individuals get very, very, very high sentencing. And this is something that doesn't just apply to France. This should apply, I believe, pretty much anywhere.
There was a really interesting change of tone as the trial progressed from Salah Abdeslam. He started from being this rather defiant soldier of the Islamic State group, he said. But by the end of the trial, and towards the end, he was apologising and then ultimately begging for forgiveness. That sends out a really important message, doesn't it, to would-be jihadists who might have looked at him as being some sort of a role model figure.
Yeah, no, certainly. And I think it's incredibly advantageous to show that actually many of these individuals are just misguided and they are actually cowards. These are individuals that are targeting innocent civilians, not combatives. It's not like it's on a battlefield where it's an almost even playing field. But I think it does send a very clear message out to others that this is not a martyr. This is not someone who is standing for the jihad as a crusade. This is someone who is pleading for the mercy of the court because they understand what they did was entirely wrong. And whether they did or they didn't, regardless, that message is being communicated.
And just lastly, I mean, how much would you say that France and perhaps Europe as a whole was changed by what happened in 2015?
Oh, it sent huge reverberations right across not just Europe and the United Kingdom, but the United States and everywhere across the world. I mean, every counterterrorism specialist will have looked at that in great detail, looked at the attack, looked at how it was built, how it was then implemented, and how ultimately this was used to confuse the police, the response mechanisms, and also to target significant sites which would garnish international sort of recognition. So, it was a monumental day. It was a horrendous day for France, especially for Paris, and for those that obviously were immediately caught up with it. And that's not just the victims, but also the emergency services. And we've got to remember that those individuals will still be suffering potentially to today with the PTSD that they will be have experienced from reacting and responding to that situation.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Will Geddes, a counterterrorism expert and specialist on hostage negotiations. Thank you very much indeed.